This episode is brought to you by BigMooseCoffeeCompany.co. Pals, if any of you guys just come to the podcast for Chris, then I'm sorry you're going to be disappointed. You should just go ahead, leave a bad review and tune out now. But for the sane ones out there, you've just got me tonight. We are at the tail end of a 2-day recording binge. This is going to be the 7th podcast we've recorded in the last 48 hours. And some has just had more stamina than others. Not saying anything there, Chris. Just, I'm still here. And I'm really lucky. That means I'm getting tonight's guest all to myself. And I'm pretty happy about that. Tonight's guest is pretty exceptional. Not that they haven't all been. He was already in an elite group. As of 2017, he won one of the toughest races on the planet, putting him in a group that at the time numbered about 15 worldwide. As of January this year, he is in an elite group of 1. He is numero uno in the extreme, disgusting length running scene. I'm going to be talking tonight to a guy that has won 2 races who you could start a 3-hour-long pub argument about which one of the 2 is the tougher. I'm going to be talking to the incredible John Kelly. Is that a spine medal I can see over your shoulder there?
Actually, yeah, it is.
You just happen to have one lying around.
Well, yeah, it's been sitting here. I don't have it put up yet with the rest of my medals. Well, someone actually in the office complex where I work asked me to bring it in. He wanted to see it, and I said, well, I'll just wait till I get the trophy and bring them both in. So it's been sitting here waiting.
That's a big trophy as well.
Yeah. It's and I've got my box up there as well. Phil dropped that by earlier. Well,
fantastic!
It was last week, yeah. So that's it's impressive.
Yeah, the guys watching this on YouTube will have to take our word for that. It's a beautifully ornate matte box that what I remember most clearly about you telling me about that. Oh, here we go.
Well,
there it is.
Did you see it up there?
Beautiful.
So it fits perfectly on top of my bookshelf up there.
And it's almost like they designed it with you in mind.
Yeah, it matches the wood and everything.
I really remember the morning after the race. I'd had to come through. We were going to do an interview for, I think it was BBC Radio Cumbria or something like that. And you were just admiring the fact that the person who'd built it had bothered to line all of the screw heads up exactly. All the way through.
Yeah, that really connected with me quite well. I'm a little bit OCD, as you might imagine, and if it doesn't matter if I'm building something or putting the battery cover back on one of my kids' toys, I've got to get them lined up just perfectly.
I like that. That a man of a meticulous nature is going to do well in the kind of races you put yourself into.
Yeah, it helps.
Yeah, and I've kind of jumped in straight talking about the matte box there. I've probably avoided a lot of the achievements that we actually came here to talk about. I don't really think I need to elaborately introduce John Kelly. For anyone that has been living under a rock for the last few months, John recently finished the spine race in just shy of 88 hours, which is outrageous, putting him in an elite club of 1 as people who have finished both the spine and the Barkley Marathons, which is an outrageous achievement. Now there's been a little bit of time for the dust to settle. How are you feeling about your spine win?
It's, still feels as great as it did initially. Well, I'll say better than it did initially, because initially I, couldn't really comprehend or process much that was going on. But yeah, it's really one of those things that it's quite rare for me. As we mentioned, I'm rather meticulous, and I almost always look back at a race and say, oh, I could have done that a little bit better, and I should have done that, and that's great. It can help me improve and do better for the next race. But the spine is one of those nice occasions where I really don't I don't see any way that I could have had an outcome that would have been more gratifying. So there's really none of that. Sure, there are definitely things I could have improved on, but the outcome would have been the same. So it's been wonderful.
That's fantastic to come out of a race and feel like, yeah, that sort of went by the numbers, especially a race that throws as much at you as this one can.
Yeah, and in an ultra, especially one of this distance and these types of conditions, you're never going to have a perfect race. And sometimes more things go wrong than other times, and I've definitely had a lot of races last year where I had some things go wrong and came up a bit short. So those just made the race where more things went right than wrong all the much better.
Well, before we jump ahead too far, there was one thing I wanted to ask you about, which is that obviously John Kelly, ultra runner, sort of became a more well-known name after you put in that amazing run in 2017 in the Barkleys, but you didn't just begin to exist at that point in time. What was your journey towards these disgusting length races that you seem to have carved a little niche in?
I kind of came at it from two directions. I ran in high school. I kind of took a decade off after that, but I'd always, even in high school, said to myself, I'd like to try something a bit longer. I think I'm better at the longer distances. The 5K doesn't really cut it for me. So after grad school, I signed up for a marathon, and things just kind of progressed from there in terms of I can go a bit farther. I can do a bit better. And then on the other side, I've always loved hiking and backpacking and spending time in the mountains. And about the same time I got back into running, I discovered there were these crazy people that actually went and ran through the mountains and did races. And that just really struck me as, wow, I can see so much more and experience so much more in the limited amount of time that I have if I go out there and run and instead of hike. And hiking, of course, definitely has its huge benefits of really being able to soak it all in. But I want to see more of it right now.
That's a very engineering approach to take to that as well. Like I could see more wonderful things if I just moved a little bit quicker on the ground.
Yeah.
No, it's flawless logic. Physically, then, how's the recovery going from the spine? I can't imagine what putting 268 miles through your legs really feels like.
It's going pretty well. So there wasn't anything coming out of the spine that really concerned me as a potential long-term issue or something that might become chronic. I messed up my ankle a good bit in the race, but I knew that would recover. There were some other niggles here and there, some blisters and whatnot. So I started running again last week, and today had a pretty solid run. And really, yeah, there are a couple. I can tell I'm not at 100%, but I'm definitely getting there.
Wow, fantastic! And we can check out your new professional Strava profile if we want to see what you're up to in training.
Yeah, it's they switched me over to that after they just I guess posted a feature on the spine today, and they love showing off long GPX files there. So
yeah, I mean I'm a geek for that kind of thing too. I love it. But that's it. You're official now. You're
yeah, I guess so. I'll just wait for those signing bonuses to come rolling in and quit my day job, and I'll have it made.
I'm sure it's just around the corner.
Yeah, any day.
It's crazy to think of, isn't it? And I know this is a conversation I've had over and over again with people in the ultra running scene, that the amount of time and effort and energy that is expelled by ultra runners and the huge achievements you do, it really feels like you should have people turning up at your door and offering you millions of pounds to come and do it again. Yeah,
I mean, in all fairness, well, spine aside, y'all did such a great job with the coverage. It kind of was a spectator sport, but for the most part, it's not a very spectator-friendly sport. Most of us that do these sorts of things, definitely those distances, you have to very much be internally motivated to do that. but yeah, it's I've got a one of my good friends from growing up is on the PGA Tour, and he's won three tournaments, and he's set for life from that. But I'm not sending three kids to college through professional ultra running.
You'll always have that medal, though, John.
I will.
Your professional Strava
and the
account.
box. Yeah. Well, I don't know. They might take that away from me one day.
No way. Not going to happen. So going into the Spine, do you feel like the race met your expectations? And most people are very, very daunted by the idea of going onto the course. How were you feeling going into it?
I felt great. I was ready to get out there and have an adventure and see what the race brought. It's one of those things where a lot of these types of longer adventures, it's really, while the conditions might seem daunting, it's a huge, I guess, I don't want to say relaxation, but it's just such a huge disconnect from the stresses of everyday life. There is no one from work that can send me an urgent Slack message or an email or anything while I'm out there. Like I am cut off, and I'm in my own world, and I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So it's when I have those things on the calendar, a lot of times they can very much be something to look forward to as a nice relaxing holiday.
Yeah, again, talking about you as being in an elite group of people, I think that puts you in an elite group of people that would view something like the Spine as a holiday or a break from the stresses of everyday life. You got some fairly spiny conditions. I know we talked about it. When I first met you in Edale, you were saying that you were hoping for some snow later in the week. Snow really turned out to be the least of your problems, though, doesn't it? You ran straight into Storm Brendan.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that hit as we were going up Tan Hill, and that was unbelievable. I've really never experienced anything quite like that in terms of the wind and the sleet in combination. The only time that I got snow was going over Crossfell, where it was pretty decently thick.
We tried,
but as far as conditions for performance, I would much rather have snow and freezing than I would have slightly above freezing and rain and mud, which is what we had pretty much the entire time.
Yeah. And I mean the wind as much as anything on the way up to Tan Hill. You described it in your race blog that at the time of recording you've literally just put out as sounding like a jet engine with snare drums. Yeah,
just the wind just ripping by me and my hood getting constantly pelted by these tiny little balls of hail. It was just you could hardly think inside your own head.
Even with the amount of experience you've got out in the hills, do you still find those kind of conditions intimidating?
Not really. I mean, I'm out there to race, and I know that everyone else is facing those same conditions on a course that long. Sure, the conditions can vary a bit depending on where people are when those storms hit. But for the most part, everyone has to face the same things. And really, with that aspect in mind, I view those as opportunities. The more variables that come into play, the more chances there are for me to capitalize on them.
Fantastic. Plays into your hands. By the time you'd got as far as, I suppose, if we're in the region of Tan Hill, that was after Hawes, right? So you were at that point part of quite a small leading group of the race. You'd gone out quick. Was there a time early on where you had your eye on that course record, or do you not look at the numbers like that? Are you racing yourself, or are you racing the time?
I'm racing the other racers, my competition. So I mean, I was out there to win, and very much had that strategy in mind. If there had been a point in the race where The win had been all but assured, and I still had a chance at the record, then I probably would have given it a go and asked how far ahead or behind the record I was, and seen what I could do. But I was definitely not going to in any way lower my chances of winning the race by going for a time trial run instead.
No, understood. You had some excellent competitors around you at that point as well. I guess you'd have had Eugenie, Ian, Jason Cavill as well, Andre Hook, who was kind of an unexpected package at that point.
Yeah, so Andre was with us for pretty good ways on section one. I think, unfortunately, at some point he took a bit of a wrong turn. But I spent most of the first, I'd say, section and a half really getting challenged by Eugenie and trying to keep him out of reach. Really longer than that. Eugenie was still with me. He came into checkpoint 4 as I left checkpoint 4. So he was challenging me for quite a ways. Ian kind of from checkpoint 2 to checkpoint 4. And then Jason, to be honest, didn't really come on my radar until halfway to checkpoint 5, somewhere around Hadrian's Wall. Someone told me that he was really closing the gap on me, and he hadn't swept at Alston and was the next one out after me. So that was quite the surprise for me at that time. And he ran an amazing race and put on a really strong challenge at the end that had me running pretty scared there coming out of checkpoint 5.
Yeah, I think everyone who followed the race this year expects pretty big things in the future for Jason Cavill. That was an amazing run he put in there. We were all the way up before we got into the Cheviots, before Jason had to pull out. At what point did you become aware that you were then clear on your own?
Really not until Hut 2. There was... Yeah, there was someone that had seen me. He'd come out to see me a few miles before Hut 2, and he told me that no one was near me on the tracker. But in my head at that point, I was thinking, well, there's no way that Jason is that far back. His tracker must have stopped working, and so I didn't believe it at that point, and until I got to checkpoint 2, when the safety team there confirmed to me that yeah, Jason had to pull out, and that's the point at which I said, okay, I'm just gonna hang out here with you guys for an hour or two.
Yeah, you took a little coffee break in Hut 2, didn't you?
Yeah, well, more hot chocolate. I think I had 3 or 4 cups of hot chocolate and some soup, and just really wanted to make sure that my body temperature was good before I tackled that last climb and the descent into Kirkyetum, because at that point there was no sense taking any chance whatsoever. Again, sure, I could have put in a faster finishing time, but if that came with a 5% or even a 1% chance of DNFing a few miles from the finish, as unfortunately happened to Eugenie last year,
yeah,
then no thanks.
No, I don't think our hearts could have taken it on the finish line either. After the drama of what happened to Eugenie, I don't think we could have stood watch. We'd have just wrapped up the finish line and gone home. What do you remember? What do you remember from the course? What sticks out as your favorite parts of that course?
High Cup, so Cauldron Snout and High Cup Neck were definitely huge highlights. And, I've only got about 1/3 of the course to choose from because most of it was in the
darkness. Yeah.
But yeah, so going up the River Tees just before Cauldron Snout, that was one of my least favorite parts of the course. You're scrambling along boulders next to the riverbank, and it's really slow going. And that's the point that I wanted to put in a big push, and I couldn't on that terrain. But then climbing up Cauldron Snout with all the rain, there was a ton of water coming out of the reservoir, and the waterfall itself was just enormous. The volume of water and the power of that water coming over, and we're climbing up right next to it. That was a heck of an experience. And then Hike Up Nick was beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's an absolutely stunning spot up there. And what about least favorites?
That would probably be a compilation of all the bogs along the course.
Yeah, there's a lot of those.
Yeah, but Blinkensip, I think I pronounced that right. Blinkensop, common just before Greenhead. I took a bit of a wrong turn there and was thrashing about in the heather, trying to get back on course. The bog, really the lake coming down from Tan Hill Inn. Pretty much the entire path's underwater there, and there are just random stakes in the ground where maybe the path would be if there were a path. So those sections were really slow going and tough and a bit frustrating, especially if you just made the slightest wrong turn in there.
And one thing people talk about a lot on this race, it's impossible not to, 88 hours. What would you say you had cumulatively in sleep in that time?
So I initially had about 2 hours in Middleton, and then I went down for I got some food, had some work done on my feet, and felt drowsy, so went back down for another 30 minutes. So 2.5 hours there, and then went up through low force and high force. Up along, well, just before that boulder scramble along River Tees, it was dawn, and I was feeling a bit drowsy again, and there was a nice stone wall, and I said, well, that's a lovely spot. It's shielded from the wind, and I'll wait out this last little bit of the night and get my energy back up. Took a 15-minute nap there, and then section 5 between, so the second half, mostly the Hadrian's Wall portion. I took a number of there's spots I just could not keep my eyes open, and I went down for, quick 5 to 10 minute naps, quite a few of them, which I didn't want to do, but I felt that I had to at that point. And then at Bellingham, I got 45 minutes. So all in all, I'd say roughly 3 hours and 45 minutes. Total,
which for anyone outside the scene or only just coming into it, seems outrageous that you could function that highly for that long with that small amount of sleep. It's something Ian Keith was talking about when we spoke to him earlier about the amazing restorative power of 10 or 15 minutes of getting your head down. You find that works the same for you?
Yeah, it's something that I discovered really back in that year when I finished Barkley on that last loop. I was struggling so much. And going down for about 15 minutes, just it's miraculous what it does for your mind. And when I'm in that spot where, again, I just flat can't keep my eyes open, 15 minutes, it takes a minute or two to really wake up. But once you get moving again, I'm alert and I'm great. And it lasts me at least for a few hours, and then I might need to do it again. And so it doesn't do much for your body. It does wonders for your mind. I've found through my races of this distance, you definitely can't do it for the entire time and get away with it. I tried that at Tour de Géant last year, and it pretty much wrecked my race. I dropped from like 4th place to 16th. And so to me, it's more of a let's just get by until we can get to a spot where we can get a better sleep, or the sun comes up and kind of rejuvenates us. It's let's just hold on for a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's amazing what seeing the dawn can do for your state of mind, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you've now built in this mechanism where 10, 15 minutes of sleep can turn you around a little bit. But would you say over time you get better at coping and functioning in a very sleep deprived state? Because what's in my head is when you got into Hawes, I'll be honest, in sort of the 5 or 6 years I've been working around the ultra running scene, I don't think I've ever seen anyone look so low on energy, but go through all of their admin and kit changes and be able to move back out onto the course again. You looked for all the world like you were asleep at times, but yeah, just got it done.
Yeah, and to be honest, maybe I was a little bit. I can't remember much of Haas, or like what the inside of the checkpoint looked like. I know that the medics were checking me out. I went to the toilet for a bit, and I don't know, may have fell asleep a couple minutes there. But I also knew that, I recognized from experience that this was a low point. I knew that that was a bad time of day for me, and that if I could just push through it a little bit longer, again, that was right around dawn. And for me, normally it takes me till a couple hours after dawn where my body really wakes up. And so I knew that if I could just push a little bit longer, that I could get through it. And it's amazing how that can happen. And if you haven't experienced it before, you wouldn't think it's possible. You wouldn't think you can go from feeling like that and being basically non-functioning to suddenly you're racing again and feeling great, like it never happened. But it can definitely happen, and it just takes experience to learn when it can and when it can't, and you really do need to stop and do something.
Would you say being able to manage some of those really low moments is part of what you enjoy about the process? Because I know for people looking into the ultra running scene from the outside, we look like masochists.
Yeah, and that's something that's really gotten me again about Barkley. There's so many things written that, oh, it's the masochist's race, and Laz is a masochist, and Laz is a sadist, and all the runners are masochists, and it's very much missing the point where those things to me imply that you get pleasure in the pain. And in those low points, it's the pleasure is not in that. The pleasure is in overcoming those, and in learning how you can overcome those, and learning that you can. And that applies to so much more beyond running in everyday life, where you learn that you really can get through these tough situations. As bleak as it might seem, it doesn't always get worse.
Fantastic. Well, we can have that as a tagline for this episode. It doesn't always get worse.
Yeah, that's something that was told to me quite early on when I started ultra running, and I've been told recently that it probably traces back to David Horton, who is a bit of an ultra running legend who lives in Virginia, in the U.S.
Fantastic. What else? What else attracts you to it? What makes you get out of bed in the morning and push towards these goals?
So again, it's really finding what I can do, and I mean, not only that, I guess, objective of being able to run around through the mountains that for a long time and quickly, that in itself, to be honest, is rather arbitrary and doesn't hold a ton of real value. But learning what enables me to do that, and what kind of holds me back from doing that, or what makes it difficult for me to do that, and then how to capitalize on those strengths, how to overcome or sidestep those weaknesses. Again, that's something that is immensely valuable to me. And outside of that, again, we go back to the exploration aspect. It's so fun for me to not only see these beautiful landscapes, but to experience these new conditions and these new situations, and these new varieties of British junk food that I never saw in the U.S. All of these things are just new, and it's great.
Yeah, you now know what jelly babies are. That's something I took from your blog.
Yeah, they are. I could only describe them as like a gummy snack, but in the U.S. we don't really have anything that equals them.
No, and that's a tremendously sad situation. I'm sorry to hear that. Gummy bears are an institution here. You'll have to be an ambassador and take them back over.
You have a giant void in the snack cake market, though. So it's
sorry about that.
It's a trade-off.
You can't have everything, mate. You can't have everything. Yeah. So I mentioned before, obviously, dragging yourself out of bed early in the morning. You are not making millions out of the sport, as we said. Perhaps you should take up golf. So inevitably, you end up in a situation like so many ultra runners where you are juggling your training with full-time employment and a young family, I believe.
Yeah, we've got a 5-year-old and two 3-year-old twins.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. So you had a busy enough schedule without all of this thrown into it.
Yeah, and so it's a matter of learning how to fit those things together and kind of eliminate other things that don't really provide much value to you but take up a lot of time.
What does a average training week look like to you?
For the most part, well, really not for the most part, entirely. My weekday mileage is as my run commute. I've been quite fortunate for really the past 7 years or so to work in environments and in locations where that was possible. And so to me, that is free training time, as in it's time that otherwise I would be wasting just sitting on the bus or on the train or whatever. And so that's it during the week. I run to and from work. Sometimes I'll alter or extend my route a little bit, but I basically get there just as quick as the bus could, if the bus is on time, which is rare. And then on weekends, that's when I'll get some of my sort of longer or more specialized workouts in, maybe hill repeats or something. And so I'll just fit those in early in the morning or during kids' naps or late at night on the treadmill, just however happens to work out.
Fantastic. And would you say the run into the spine was a continuation of your normal training, or was there anything specific that you did on the run in?
It was pretty well a continuation, and honestly not as great as I would have hoped. It was a busy stretch for work, had family travel for the holidays, and I didn't get nearly the volume or the specialized, the specificity of training that I would have liked. I got a big run at Frozen Head a couple weeks before, where Barkley is, when I was visiting my parents. But it's also just such a great reminder that for this type of thing, what really matters is the volume and accumulation of miles and experience over many, many years. That final build is kind of the icing on the cake. And so even if you're headed to the starting line, not quite feeling great about your recent training, you're probably in a better spot than you think you are.
For anyone that's listening to this, and I know there will be, I know the Spine sold out a couple of days ago, so there's a few hundred people nervous. Wow. Oh yeah, in something like 5 hours. The last couple of years have just been fantastic for the race. The followship all over the world has just gone insane. So yeah, 5 hours it was gone. It's like Glastonbury for running now. I can't remember where I was going now. I'm just throwing myself into Glastonbury. I think I'm having flashbacks. So yeah, there will be a whole bunch of people out there now listening into this podcast and trawling through all the blogs they can find, looking for little nuggets of information on how they're going to drag themselves through it. If you're talking to those guys now, what should they be thinking about in their training?
getting used to bad conditions, I would say is the biggest part, and
And we're in the
so much
UK.
of
We've
these.
got them. Yeah.
That's true. You don't have to look far. So dealing with those situations that just seem absolutely miserable, and like you can't go on, or you can't motivate yourself for it. Learning how to best deal with those, and how to find the silver lining in them, so that you can push through. I would say that getting yourself mentally in the right spot is just as important, and probably more difficult than putting in the volume of the actual physical training. So that for me goes again back to my Barkley training, where if it was snowing or cold or miserable outside, then I would look at that and say, great, it was a perfect training opportunity.
And there you go. So you've got to look forward to the bad weather.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. What about how they might structure a week? Is there a particular type of training they should be pointing themselves at? I know everybody's different, but we're generalizing here drastically.
My favorite type of training is the training that you can do. And that's, as you mentioned earlier, pretty much everyone that's doing this is going to be someone that has a job or a family and other enormous time commitments. And if you only have 10 hours or however many hours per week for running, use those hours for running. Don't use those hours for trying to go find the perfect location or structure the perfect workout. I think it's much better, especially for something like the spine, to get 10 hours in of running than to get in 6 hours of higher quality running and use the other 4 for driving or planning for those runs.
Fair enough. Good answer. I can't be the only person you've talked to in a podcast setting over the last few days. Have you had quite a lot of attention off the back of the big race you've done over the last couple of years, really? How have you found that? Because I think a lot of people that come from a background where they spend a lot of time out in the hills and the wilderness are often quite not necessarily extroverted people. How have you been finding the attention?
Yeah, so I'm very much an introvert by nature, and for the most part, it has been a good deal of attention. Not as much as when I finished Barkley, but over the past couple of years, I've really learned the value in that, and seen how much it helps to be able to share these experiences and to hopefully enable people to take on their own challenges and get out there and do things like the spine. There was I put out a blog post last week that Lazarus Lake, the creator of the Barkley Marathons, had sent out a message regarding media in the wilderness. And it's something that has kind of always been a hot topic of debate at Barkley. In providing this coverage of what used to be a rather secretive race. And he puts it in quite eloquently and succinctly in a way that I've never been able to in terms of the great value of being able to share these experiences more broadly and expose people to them, so that maybe they'll be motivated to get out there and experience them themselves, and if not, if they don't want to, or if they're not able to, they'll at least see the value of these wild places and the experiences that people can have out there, and that's something that we really need these days is for people to be able to see that value.
I really enjoyed that blog as well. Often when I'm doing these podcasts and somebody refers to a blog that they've published recently, I'm pretending when I say I read it. But I definitely did. That really fascinated me. He referred to, what's it? You're not just runners anymore. You are spokespeople for wild places.
Yeah, exactly. And, That blog should have spoken to you well, since I titled it "Media in the Wilderness," and you are in fact media in the wilderness. So,
well, it is something that troubles me. You guys come blundering into a checkpoint looking like hell, and my job is to point a camera in your face and ask you how you're doing for the sake of the people at home. And I find that a tricky relationship to manage sometimes. I don't always feel comfortable being too in people's faces while they're doing it, but equally, I'm feeling it from the other side. There are 1,000 people that want to see how you're doing at the moment because they're absolutely inspired by what you are showing that people are capable of.
Yeah, and I'll be the first to admit that in the moment, at times, when I'm in race mode or I'm in a low point, that's, we'll just say, not something that I enjoy. But it's very rare that I look back at it afterwards and am not appreciative of it having been there and having that moment captured.
I'd have to say you were an absolute gentleman along the way.
Well, thank you. Y'all probably have some video of some of my lower moments that you've held closer to the chest. So I appreciate that.
It's mainly your means of dealing with sleep deprivation. I think that was the footage we were most fascinated by.
Yeah.
The John Kelly scream.
Yeah, the scream, the shouting things at myself, singing. Normally start off with normal songs and then kind of morph into just songs I make up, and then songs I make up with words that I make up, and it's just kind of by the end complete gibberish with a melody.
Oh, we haven't got any of that footage. We might have to tap up the Japanese film crew for that.
They might have some. I remember specifically one instant where it was happening, where just before Greenhead, and there's a bit of a descent, and you cross a highway, and then go through a golf course, and a woman came out there to cheer us on, and she waited at the top of that hill, and then ran down the hill to the highway with me, and made sure I made it across the highway safely, which was very helpful at that point. But the whole time we're running down that descent, I am just sounding like an absolute loon, singing these just noises to myself, and I just, even in the moment, I kind of went through my head like, what is this woman thinking right now? She is out here in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, running next to this guy that sounds like absolutely crazy. So maybe she recorded some on her phone, but that was very much appreciated. And it was just really cool to see people come out there in those types of conditions to see us run by, or to give us a ton of the
race, right? I'm always, it gives me back a little bit of my faith in humanity to see the lengths that people are willing to go to give a flapjack to a runner in the middle of a rainy night. Yeah,
it's incredible.
And given any
some
particularly
of those
good snacks?
Some of those were huge. I like I said, I got a tonic bar. There was a giant frosted flapjack I got coming. That was actually coming out of Burness. Some chocolate. A guy was out there beating a drum with his daughter, giving out water and chocolate. But then the most magical for me was coming down from Tan Hill, where you cross the highway or the motorway. No, I think it was an A road. I can't remember which one.
Probably seemed like a motorway at the time, but
so you go down from Tan Hill, you cross underneath the road. There's an underpass, and then you continue on to Middleton. So someone there had frozen pizza that was just magical. Pizza is one of my favorite items during a race, and it's very rare that if it's an unsupported race that I'm able to get any. So I downed that quite quickly.
If you are listening, anonymous pizza person, we are very, very grateful for your work. Not wanting desperately to move on from the spine, but there is something I definitely want to talk to you about, which was your Grand Round project. So for anyone who hasn't sort of heard about this, I know you made an attempt at it last year. What is the Grand Round?
So I got this idea in my head to do all three of the UK's classic fell running rounds, at least the three on this side of the Irish Sea, and do them consecutively and link them together, riding my bike in between them.
Wow. Okay. So that's three epic adventures in their own right. We've earlier yesterday we spoke to Damien Hall, who's just taken the Paddy Buckley winter record. That's a 61-mile race with the cycling in between. Do you know what mileage the cycling adds up to?
So Paddy Buckley to Bob Graham, I believe the mileage was around 185. And then Bob Graham to Charlie Ramsey, it's around 230.
Which is just staggering. And what sort of time constraints will you be putting on yourself for this?
So last year I was trying to do the whole thing in 100 hours. I came a bit short. The weather was atrocious, and I didn't get much sleep, and ended up calling it shortly after I'd gotten on my bike to head to Scotland. I made it through Paddy Buckley and Bob Graham, both in under 24 hours. And so the next attempt, I think I'm going to say 120. That's the magic of making up your own things. You can kind of figure out what is the most appropriate thing as you go along. So I think 120, that gives 24 hours for each thing, 24 hours for each round and 24 hours for each bike leg. And doing that will give me allow me to plan a much better schedule, and get better sleep going through it, because it's one thing to be staggering along Hadrian's Wall about to fall asleep. It's another thing to be riding my bike up a busy Scottish mountain highway.
God, yeah, absolutely. And do you know when you might take another go at this, or is this one just sort of in the pocket somewhere in the long run?
I'm planning it for the summer.
Excellent. Well, we'll definitely be keeping an eye out for that. Will there be like a tracker out there for people to look at? Or are you just going to sneak off and do this one?
Well, last year I had a tracker, so I'll probably put that out there again. But I'm probably not going to really announce the specific date beforehand, and really I won't know the specific date beforehand, because I'm this year going to give myself a little bit of a window for the start date, so that I can look at the forecast and hopefully avoid the worst of the worst weather.
And what about the rest of the racing calendar? Have you got any more races lined up for the year?
So I'm, this year I'm taking it a bit more, especially with these quite large efforts that I'm putting in. I'm taking
quite
it a bit
large.
more. Seeing how they go and how I recover from them, rather than trying to force a bunch of things on the schedule from the outset like I did last year, and I ended up stretching myself a bit too thin, and didn't really have the outcomes that I was hoping for as a result of that.
Well, here's hoping you get the outcomes you're looking for in all your races this year, pal. It's thank you very much for talking to us this evening. You've, as we've covered, got an extremely busy schedule, so we're grateful for you taking the time.
Thank you very much. It was great to chat again when I'm not delirious lying in a border hotel bed.
Or sitting in one of the plant pots outside, as I remember.
Yeah, that was.
It's a perfectly comfortable chair under the circumstances.
It really is.
Well, fantastic. Well, look, enjoy the rest of your evening, John, and enjoy the rest of your year. We'll be watching your adventures keenly.
Thank you very much, and you have a good evening as well.
Thank you. We will. And theme tune.